The blood-curdling howl cut through the night air, freezing Dane Riker in his tracks. His hand instinctively moved to the pulse rifle strapped across his back as his eyes scanned the darkness beyond his makeshift shelter. Whatever had made that sound was close, too close, and it wasn't native to Kylora 7. 3 years on this forgotten rock had taught him to recognize every indigenous predator by its call. This was something new, something dangerous. The night sky suddenly blazed with light as a massive object tore through the atmosphere overhead, trailing fire and smoke. The deafening roar shook the ground beneath his feet as the unidentified craft crashed into the mountain range less than 2 kilometers from his position. Orbital patrol would have shot down anything hostile, Dane muttered to himself, reaching for his field pack. Whatever, or whoever, had just crash-landed might need help, or might present a threat. Either way, he needed to investigate. The bitter wind cut through his thermal gear as he trudged up the steep terrain. Jagged rock formations cast long shadows in the ghostly blue light of Kylora's 3 moons. By the time he reached the ridge overlooking the crash site, his lungs burned from the thin air at this altitude. The shuttle, or what remained of it, lay in a smoking crater, its hull torn open like a gutted fish. Twisted metal and shattered glass reflected the flames still licking at the wreckage. The ship's design was unfamiliar, clearly not of human origin, its sleek lines and unusual configurations, unlike anything in the colonial fleet. Dane drew his rifle and approached cautiously, stepping through the debris field. The acrid smell of burning synthetics and something else, something organic, filled his nostrils. There were no bodies visible, no signs of survivors. Until he heard it, a soft, pained whimper coming from beneath a section of collapsed bulkhead. Using his rifle butt as leverage, Dane pried up the twisted metal. What he found beneath stopped his breath. A creature no larger than a Terran mountain lion cub lay curled among the wreckage, its midnight blue hide glistening with what appeared to be stars. Actual points of light that pulsed dimly beneath its skin. 2 deep gashes ran along its flank, leaking iridescent purple blood onto the scorched earth. The creature's eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle pattern, snapped open as it sensed Dane's presence. They were startlingly intelligent eyes, the color of burnished gold with vertical pupils that contracted in the firelight. The creature hissed, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth, but made no move to attack. It was too badly injured. "Easy now," Dane said softly, crouching to assess the animal. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature's eyes locked with his, and for a fleeting moment, Dane felt something brush against his consciousness. A feather-light touch that sent shivers down his spine. Not telepathy exactly, but something. A distant rumble of approaching ships made his decision for him. Whatever this creature was, someone else wanted it badly enough to send a retrieval team. And on Kylora 7, far beyond the jurisdiction of the Colonial Alliance, questions weren't asked before shooting. "Looks like we're both in trouble now," Dane muttered, shrugging off his pack and pulling out a compact medical kit. The creature growled weakly as he applied a synthetic skin sealant to its wounds, but didn't resist. When he carefully gathered it into his arms, he was surprised by how light it felt despite its dense musculature. "I'm calling you Naira," he told the creature as he made his way back through the mountains, taking a circuitous route to avoid detection. "Had a cat named that when I was a kid. She was a fighter too." The creature's 3 eyes blinked slowly, then closed as it slipped into unconsciousness. Dane's hideout was actually an abandoned mining outpost, nestled in a narrow canyon where the wind howled through stone arches day and night. Inside, he'd converted the former mess hall into living quarters, with the adjoining rooms serving as storage and a makeshift medbay. It wasn't much, but after what he'd seen during the Centauri conflict, the isolation suited him fine. He placed the unconscious creature, Naira, on the exam table and ran a portable scanner over its form. The readings made no sense. According to the device, the creature's cellular structure was constantly shifting, reorganizing itself on a molecular level. "What the hell are you?" he whispered. For 3 days, Naira drifted between consciousness and sleep, accepting water but refusing the protein rations Dane offered. On the 4th morning, he awoke to find the examination table empty. Heart pounding, he reached for his sidearm only to freeze when he spotted Naira crouched in the corner of the room, watching him with those unnerving golden eyes. The wounds on her flank had already healed, leaving faint silver lines in the starry blue skin. "Hungry?" Dane asked cautiously, reaching slowly for a container of preserved meat from his dwindling stores. He tossed a piece halfway between them. Naira's gaze flicked to the food, then back to Dane. Slowly, deliberately, she approached the meat, sniffed it, then looked up at him with what could only be described as disdain. "Sorry it's not five-star cuisine," Dane chuckled despite himself, "but it's what we've got." To his surprise, the creature made a sound almost like a sigh, then delicately picked up the meat and ate it. Over the next few weeks, a tentative routine developed. Neera recovered rapidly, exploring the outpost with obvious curiosity, but never straying far from Dane. She proved to be an intelligent and surprisingly adaptable companion, quickly learning which areas were off-limits and even responding to basic commands. But it was during the nightmares that their relationship truly changed. The dreams had plagued Dane since Centauri, vivid recreations of the massacre at New Johannesburg, where he'd lost his wife Elena and their daughter Mira to the insurgents. He would wake screaming, drenched in sweat, the phantom smell of burning buildings still in his nostrils. One particularly bad night, he jolted awake to find Naira pressed against his side, her unusual warmth seeping into his trembling body. The creature made a low, thrumming sound that vibrated through his chest, somehow both soothing and strengthening. And then, without warning, the feather-light touch returned to his mind, but stronger this time, more deliberate. Images flowed into his consciousness, a massive city of crystalline spires, halls draped in shimmering blue fabric, beings with skin the color of Neera's moving with fluid grace. He saw battles, explosions, a desperate flight through space. He saw Naira, not as she was now, but different, larger, standing upright beside a tall, regal figure whose face remained in shadow. The connection broke suddenly, leaving Dane gasping. Neera's eyes, inches from his own, seemed to hold a question. "What are you?" he whispered again. The transformation happened without warning. Dane returned from hunting to find not the sleek, four-legged creature he'd left behind, but a humanoid figure standing in the center of his quarters. Tall and slender, with the same midnight blue skin spangled with stars. Neera now stood on two legs, her body covered in what appeared to be a form of natural armor that followed the contours of her lithe frame. Her face had elongated, becoming more angular, though the three golden eyes remained. A mane of what looked like liquid silver cascaded down her back. Dane raised his rifle instinctively, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Please don't," said Naira, her voice melodic yet resonant, like wind through crystal. "I mean you no harm, Dane Riker." "What? How?" he stammered, the rifle wavering but not lowering. "I am Naira Val, guardian of the Third Circle, sworn protector to Her Imperial Radiance, Empress Zalari of Valteran." She inclined her head slightly. "And I owe you a life debt." Dane's mind raced. "The ship. You were escaping something." "Not something, someone." Naira's expression darkened. "There was an attempt on the Empress's life. As her personal guard, I pursued the assassins to their ship. We fought, and in the battle, their vessel was damaged. I was injured and unable to prevent our crash on your world." She paused. "I took the form you found me in to conserve strength and heal." "You're a shapeshifter," Dane said flatly. "The Valari are metamorphs, yes. It is our greatest evolutionary advantage, and why we have served as the Empire's protectors for millennia." Her head tilted slightly. "You are not afraid." It wasn't a question, but Dane answered anyway. "I've seen too much to be afraid of the unknown. I'm more concerned about whoever was chasing you. Will they come looking?" "Yes." Neera's voice dropped to a near whisper. "The hunters. Elite Valari trained to track those who have broken our most sacred laws." Her eyes met his. "By allowing you to touch my mind, by forming a bond with a human, I have committed the gravest transgression in our culture." "Why did you do it then?" For the first time, Naira seemed uncertain. "I saw your dreams, your pain, your loss. It resonated with something in me. The Empress has been experimenting with creating Valari capable of deeper emotional connections, ones who could bridge the gap between our species. I am one such experiment." Dane finally lowered his rifle. So these hunters, they'll come for you because you form some kind of psychic bond with me? They will come for both of us, Nira replied grimly. In their eyes, you are now contaminated with knowledge of our true nature. They will not risk that knowledge spreading. Well, Dane said with a grim smile, they're welcome to try. I didn't survive Centauri by being easy to kill. Nira's expression softened. No, I don't imagine you did. She moved toward him with fluid grace. I cannot ask you to stand with me against them. This is not your fight. They made it my fight when they decided to put me on their hit list, Dane replied. Then more softly, besides, it's been a long time since I had something worth fighting for. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken understanding. Then Nira straightened, her posture becoming alert. They're coming, she said. Sooner than I expected. 3 hunters in a stealth skiff. They've pinpointed my energy signature. Dane was already moving, grabbing weapons and supplies. How long do we have? Hours, perhaps less. They will wait for darkness. Then we'll just have to make them regret it. The storm rolled in at dusk, turning the sky into a roiling mass of purple-black clouds split by jagged lightning. Rain lashed the canyon walls, creating treacherous cascades of water and loose stone. It was, Dane thought grimly, perfect weather for an ambush. He had positioned himself on a narrow ledge overlooking the approach to the outpost, a high-powered rifle with thermal scope braced against his shoulder. Nira had insisted on taking a more exposed position, arguing that her regenerative abilities made her the logical choice to draw first fire. The hunters arrived as silently as the storm allowed, their ship briefly visible as a darker shadow against the churning clouds before disappearing into active camouflage. Dane tracked them through his scope as they deployed from the vessel. 3 figures in articulated armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with inhuman grace despite the treacherous terrain, spreading out in a classic pincer formation. Dane keyed his comm. 3 targets, moving just as you predicted. Range 200 meters and closing. I've got the one on the left flank. Wait for my signal. Nira's voice came back, tense but controlled. Their armor is resistant to conventional weapons. Aim for the joints. Neck, shoulders, knees. Dane settled his breathing, tracking his assigned target. There was something unsettling about the hunter's movements. Too fluid, too precise. This wasn't going to be like fighting humans. The flash of blue light came without warning, a pulse of energy from Nira's position that illuminated the canyon like daylight for a split second. In that instant, Dane saw all 3 hunters freeze, their attention snapping toward the source. He squeezed the trigger 3 times in rapid succession. His target staggered as 2 rounds found the gap between helmet and shoulder plate, but remarkably stayed upright. The other 2 hunters were already moving, one racing toward Nira's position while the third vanished from view. Cursing, Dane abandoned his perch, sliding down the rain-slick rock face toward the outpost. He could hear the distinctive high-pitched whine of Valari energy weapons, a sound he now recognized from his mental connection with Nira, and the crash of bodies moving at inhuman speed. He rounded a bend to find Nira locked in combat with one of the hunters, their forms blurring with the speed of their movements. Nira's body had changed again, her limbs elongated into wicked-looking blades that sparked against the hunter's armor. But even to Dane's untrained eye, it was clear she was outmatched, fighting defensively, giving ground with each exchange. Without hesitation, Dane dropped to one knee and fired, the round catching the hunter in the back of the knee joint. As the figure stumbled, Nira's blade arm lashed out, severing the hunter's head in a spray of silvery fluid. There was no time for relief. A crushing force slammed into Dane from behind, sending him sprawling. His rifle skittered away across the wet stone as he rolled, barely avoiding a downward strike that would have impaled him. The second hunter loomed over him, faceless behind a sleek helmet, an energy blade extended from one arm. Human! The voice was eerily similar to Nira's, but devoid of any warmth. You have been contaminated. Your death will be swift. Not today, Dane grunted, drawing his sidearm and emptying the magazine into the hunter's face at point-blank range. The helmet cracked, but didn't shatter, and the hunter merely stepped back, seemingly more annoyed than injured. It raised its blade again, only to shriek as Nira's arm, now formed into something resembling a spear, burst through its chest from behind. Brother, she said softly as the hunter collapsed. May you find peace in the void. Dane struggled to his feet, breathing hard. The third one? Wounded, but escaped to their ship. Nira's form was shifting again, returning to the humanoid shape he'd first seen her adopt. We need to move. Now! They'll call for reinforcements. Dane looked back at the outpost, his home for 3 years, containing everything he owned in this world. How much time do we have? Not enough to salvage anything significant, Nira said, reading his thoughts. I'm sorry, Dane. He nodded grimly. Then we need transport off this rock. Drake's Hollow is the nearest settlement with a spaceport. 2 days' journey on foot. The hunters will expect us to run, Nira warned. They'll have the orbital approaches watched. Then we don't run, Dane replied, a plan already forming. We go on the offensive. Take the fight to them before they can bring their full strength to bear. Nira studied him with those unsettling golden eyes. You remind me of someone, she said softly. Someone I was sworn to protect. Before Dane could respond, the night was split by a massive explosion as the outpost erupted in flames, the shock wave knocking them both to the ground. The message was clear. Nowhere on Kalora 7 would be safe for them now. The journey to Drake's Hollow was a grueling test of endurance. The storm gave way to blistering heat as they crossed the salt flats, forcing them to travel by night and hide during the scorching days. Water was scarce, and Dane found himself rationing their meager supplies with increasing concern. Nira proved to be both a blessing and a complication. Her ability to alter her form allowed her to scout ahead without detection, and her enhanced senses gave them ample warning of approaching dangers. But her alien physiology struggled with Kalora's harsh conditions in ways Dane hadn't anticipated. The planet's particular radiation spectrum interfered with her ability to maintain her metamorphic state for long periods, forcing her to revert to her more vulnerable cub-like form during the hottest part of each day. During these periods of forced rest, tucked into whatever shade they could find, their mental connection deepened. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes spontaneously, images and emotions flowed between them. Dane saw more of Nira's world, the intricate politics of the Valteron court, the rigid caste system that placed the Valari at the top of the military hierarchy, the growing tensions with human colonies along the Empire's borders. In turn, Nira experienced Dane's memories of Earth, oceans and forests that no longer existed except in protected habitats, the crowded arcologies of New Sydney where he'd grown up, the horror of the Centauri conflict, and the personal loss that had driven him to seek isolation on Kalora 7. Your species is so resilient, Nira observed one evening as they prepared to resume their journey. Adaptable in ways mine could never be. We change our bodies. You change entire worlds to suit your needs. Not always for the better, Dane replied, scanning the horizon. We have a talent for destruction. As do all intelligent species. Nira's form rippled, shifting from the cub-like state to her humanoid form with visible effort. But you also create, build, dream. The Empress believes humans and Valari could achieve greatness together if only centuries of mistrust could be overcome. Dane raised an eyebrow. Is that why she was experimenting with creating Valari capable of emotional bonds? As some kind of diplomatic initiative? Nira hesitated. Not exactly. The Empress's interest is more personal. She has long been fascinated by humans, even keeping several in her court as advisors. Some on the Imperial Council consider it an unhealthy obsession. And let me guess, these counselors are the ones who tried to have her assassinated? You understand politics well for a man who chose to live alone in the wilderness, Nira said with a small smile. Dane shrugged. Human nature doesn't change much across the galaxy. Power, fear, greed, same motivators, different species. He shouldered his pack. We should move. Drake's Hollow should be visible from the next ridge. As they crested the hill 2 hours later, the settlement came into view, a haphazard collection of prefabricated structures, mining equipment, and salvaged ship parts arranged around a central landing pad. Even from this distance, Dane could see the blinking lights of ships docked at the primitive spaceport. Their hope for anonymity evaporated the moment they approached the settlement's makeshift gate. A security alert blared from speakers mounted on the perimeter fence, and armed guards appeared with weapons drawn. "Attention, unknown humanoid and companion," a mechanized voice announced. "You have been identified as persons of interest to Imperial authorities. Surrender your weapons and prepare for processing." Dane looked at Nira, whose form was already shifting, preparing for combat. "Wait," he said quietly. "Let me try something first." He raised his hand slowly. "My name is Dane Riker, former Colonial Alliance Special Forces. I'm seeking asylum for myself and my companion under Section 17 of the Frontier Settlement Accord." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Section 17 was rarely invoked but well known. The provision that allowed frontier settlements to grant temporary protection to individuals facing persecution, regardless of their origin, in exchange for services rendered to the community. "What services are you offering, Riker?" called one of the guards, a weathered woman with sergeant stripes on her dusty uniform. Dane nodded toward Nira. "My friend here can sense danger before it happens. You've had 3 attacks by the canyon prowlers this month alone, lost 2 water recyclers, and 5 good people. We can help prevent that." The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "How'd you know about those attacks?" "I have my sources," Dane lied smoothly. "And I'm betting you could use someone with my skill set and my friend's unique abilities." After a tense standoff, they were escorted into the settlement under heavy guard. Drake's Hollow turned out to be even more desperate than it appeared from a distance. Its population of roughly 2,000 miners, traders, and outcasts barely subsisting on limited resources. Water was strictly rationed, food was bland protein cultivated in nutrient tanks, and the constant threat of attack from Kelora's native predators kept everyone on edge. The settlement's council, led by Administrator Holt, a former corporate executive with a prosthetic eye and a perpetual scowl, was openly skeptical of Dane's offer. "You expect us to believe that this creature can protect us from the prowlers?" Holt demanded, eyeing Nira with undisguised suspicion. Nira had adopted a less threatening form, closer to the cub-like shape, but standing upright, her starry skin dimmed to a matte blue. "I don't expect you to believe anything," Dane replied calmly. "I expect you to judge based on results. Give us 3 days. If the prowlers attack again and we can't stop them, we'll leave peacefully." The council reluctantly agreed, assigning them a cramped shelter on the settlement's perimeter, ostensibly to give them the best chance of detecting approaching predators, but Dane suspected it was also to keep them isolated from the general population. That night, as they settled into their temporary quarters, Nira's agitation was palpable. "This delay is dangerous," she said, pacing the small room. "The hunters will have reported back by now. They will send more, many more." "Which is exactly why we need the settlement's help," Dane countered. "We can't outrun them, and we can't fight them alone. We need allies, resources, a ship. These people will turn on us the moment they learn what I truly am," Nira argued, her voice bitter. "Maybe, or maybe they'll surprise you." Dane reached out, hesitating before placing his hand on her arm. It was the first time he'd touched her in her humanoid form, and the sensation was strange. Her skin was smooth but firm, with an underlying texture like fine silk over steel. Not all humans fear what's different. Their eyes met, and the mental connection flared spontaneously. Emotions rather than images this time. A complex intermingling of fear, determination, and something deeper, something neither was ready to name. The moment was shattered by a piercing alarm. Outside, people were shouting, and floodlights suddenly illuminated the perimeter. "Prowlers!" someone yelled. "Multiple contacts, northeast quadrant." Dane grabbed his rifle, and together they raced toward the commotion. At the edge of the settlement, guards were firing wildly into the darkness beyond the fence line. In the harsh artificial light, Dane caught glimpses of sleek, predatory forms circling just outside the illuminated area. Creatures resembling earth wolves, but with elongated limbs and armored hides. "Hold your fire!" he shouted, pushing through to the front line. "You're wasting ammunition." The sergeant from earlier, Keller, he'd learned, rounded on him. "You got a better idea, off-worlder?" "Actually, yes." Dane turned to Nira, who had already begun to change, her form growing larger, more intimidating. "Show them what you can do." Nira vaulted the fence in a single bound, landing silently in the darkness beyond. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement. Then came a series of sharp, keening cries, followed by the sounds of combat, snarls, the impact of bodies, the crack of breaking bone. The settlement guards watched in stunned silence as one by one, the prowlers retreated, dragging their wounded with them. When Nira returned, she was splattered with dark ichor, her form now resembling a larger, more powerful version of the prowlers themselves, but with her distinctive blue, star-speckled hide. "They won't return tonight," she announced, shifting back to her humanoid shape as the stunned guards watched. "They communicate through pheromones. I've left a warning they'll understand." The silence that followed was broken by a child's voice. "That was amazing!" A young girl, no more than 7 or 8, had pushed to the front of the crowd. Her face was lit with wonder rather than fear as she stared up at Nira. "Can you turn into anything? Could you be like me?" "Lexi, get back here!" A woman rushed forward, pulling the child away with an apologetic but frightened glance at Nira. Administrator Holt stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "It seems we've underestimated what you bring to the table, Riker. The council will want a full briefing in the morning." As the crowd dispersed, Dane noticed something had changed. The fear was still there in the settlers' eyes, but now mixed with calculation, with possibilities. They had seen what Nira could do, and they were reassessing her value. "See?" he said quietly as they walked back to their quarters. "Progress." Nira didn't share his optimism. "They see a weapon, not an ally. Trust will not come so easily." She was right, as it turned out. The next morning, the council's briefing felt more like an interrogation. They wanted to know everything about Nira's abilities, her limitations, whether there were others like her. When Dane and Nira evaded these questions, citing security concerns, the council's frustration was evident. "We can't help you if you won't trust us with the truth," Holt insisted. "Trust is earned," Dane replied evenly. "We've demonstrated good faith. Now it's your turn." The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for what happened that afternoon. Dane and Nira were inspecting the settlement's perimeter defenses when screams erupted from the main square. They arrived to find chaos. A massive cargo lifter had malfunctioned, toppling over and pinning several people beneath it, including Lexi, the curious child from the night before. Without hesitation, Nira transformed, her body growing in size and strength, taking on characteristics Dane had never seen before. Dense musculature, reinforced skeletal structure, multiple limbs optimized for lifting. With seemingly impossible strength, she raised the multi-ton lifter high enough for others to pull the injured to safety. Lexi was the most severely hurt, her small body crushed and bleeding. The settlement's medic shook his head grimly as he examined her. "Internal injuries too severe. We don't have the equipment." "I can help," Nira said, kneeling beside the child. "But you must trust me." She looked up at Lexi's mother, who stood frozen in grief and shock. "Please." The woman hesitated only briefly before nodding. Nira placed her hands on Lexi's broken body, and her own form began to change again. Not in shape this time, but in composition. Her starry skin seemed to liquefy, flowing over the child like living mercury. Dane felt the mental connection activate, stronger than ever, as Nira channeled her regenerative abilities into the dying girl. The process lasted only minutes, but to those watching, it seemed an eternity. When Nira finally withdrew, her form solidifying slowly, exhaustion evident in every line of her body, Lexi took a deep, shuddering breath and opened her eyes. The mood in Drake's Hollow shifted dramatically after that. Fear gave way to cautious acceptance, then to something approaching awe. Children followed Nira through the settlement, begging her to demonstrate her abilities. Adults sought her advice on everything from structural reinforcement to crop cultivation. Even Administrator Holt seemed to warm to her presence. For 2 weeks, they integrated into the community, Dane lending his tactical expertise to the security teams, while Nira's unique perspective helped solve problems the settlers had struggled with for years. All the while, they worked toward their real goal, securing passage off-world. The opportunity came in the form of a battered transport ship, the Artemis, whose captain owed a debt to the settlement. With Holt's reluctant blessing, arrangements were made for Dane and Nira to leave on the next outbound flight. The night before their departure, a celebration was held in the settlement's common area. a rare luxury for people living on such tight margins. There was music, homemade alcohol, even fresh fruits from the newly thriving hydroponic gardens Nira had helped optimize. In the midst of the festivities, Lexi found Naira sitting apart from the crowd, observing with curious detachment. "Are you really leaving tomorrow?" the child asked, plopping down beside her. "Yes, little one. I must. Because of the bad people who are looking for you?" Nira smiled sadly. "You understand more than most adults, I think." Lexi nodded solemnly. "Mom says you're an angel, that you saved me with magic. Not magic, just different biology. Will you come back someday?" Before Naira could answer, the night was split by a familiar sound, the high-pitched whine of Valari energy weapons. A moment later, explosions rocked the far side of the settlement, and alarms began to blare. Dane was at Naira's side in an instant, rifle already in hand. "They found us." The attack was swift and coordinated, a squad of at least a dozen hunters breaching the settlement from multiple points. The security team fought back valiantly, but they were outmatched by the Valari's superior technology and combat abilities. In the chaos, Dane, Naira, and a group of settlers, including Lexi and her mother, found themselves cornered in the medbay, the sounds of battle drawing ever closer. "We need to surrender," Naira said, her voice hollow with defeat. "This is my fight, not theirs. Too many innocents are dying." "No," Dane responded fiercely. "The moment we give up, everyone here is dead anyway. The hunters can't leave witnesses." "Then what do you suggest?" Nira demanded. "We can't win this battle." Dane's eyes hardened with resolve. "No, but we can choose where we fight it." He turned to Lexi's mother. "The transport ship, the Artemis, is it fueled and ready?" She nodded, fear and confusion in her eyes. "Good. Get everyone you can to the landing pad. We're going to create a diversion." Before Naira could protest, Dane outlined his desperate plan. They would use the settlement's emergency protocols against the hunters, triggering a cascading system failure that would provide cover for an evacuation. "It will destroy everything these people have built," Nira objected. "Better than losing their lives," Dane countered. "Sometimes survival means leaving everything behind and starting over." In the next frantic minutes, they put the plan into motion. While settlers hurried to the spaceport, Dane and Naira fought their way to the Environmental Control Center. There they initiated a terminal shutdown of the settlement's atmospheric processors, a fail-safe designed to purge toxins in the event of contamination. The effect was immediate and devastating. Caustic emergency decontaminants flooded sections of the settlement as pressure doors slammed down, creating a maze that even the hunters struggled to navigate. In the confusion, most of the remaining settlers made it to the Artemis. Dane and Naira were the last to arrive at the landing pad, a squad of hunters close behind them. As they raced up the transport's ramp, energy blasts scorching the metal around them, Naira suddenly stumbled, a direct hit to her back sending her sprawling. Without thinking, Dane scooped her up and carried her into the ship, shouting for the pilot to take off. The Artemis lurched skyward as its cargo doors were still closing, the inertial compensators struggling to keep up with the sudden acceleration. In the ship's cramped medical bay, Dane examined Naira's wound with growing horror. The energy blast had penetrated deep, disrupting the molecular structure that allowed her to maintain her form. Her body flickered between shapes, unable to stabilize. "Stay with me," he urged, applying regenerative compounds from the ship's limited supplies. "Just hold on." Nira's golden eyes focused on him with difficulty. "Dane, I need to tell you. The Empress, .. Her voice faded as her consciousness slipped. The ship shuddered as it broke atmosphere, immediately coming under fire from an Imperial cruiser waiting in orbit. The captain's voice came over the intercom, tense with suppressed panic. "We've got multiple hostiles on an intercept course. Stealth systems failing. We need somewhere to run people, or we're all dead." Dane looked down at Nira's flickering form, remembering the mental images she had shared of her world. With grim determination, he made his way to the bridge. "Set course for Valteron," he ordered. The captain stared at him in disbelief. "The Imperial homeworld? That's suicide." "It's our only chance," Dane insisted. "Trust me." After a moment's hesitation, the captain nodded to his navigator. As the Artemis prepared to jump to FTL, Dane returned to Naira's side. "Hold on," he whispered, taking her hand, which alternated between humanoid fingers and something resembling a paw. We're going home. You're home. The journey to Valderon took 8 days in the Artemis's aging FTL drive. During that time, Naira drifted in and out of consciousness, her condition gradually stabilizing, but never fully recovering. The settlers from Drake's Hollow, now refugees, alternated between gratitude toward their saviors and fear of what awaited them in Imperial space. Dane spent the time planning, strategizing. He knew their arrival at Valteron would trigger an immediate military response. Their only hope lay in somehow getting a message directly to the Empress before the hunters could silence them permanently. As they approached the Imperial system, Nira finally regained full consciousness. Her form had stabilized in her humanoid shape, though she admitted privately to Dane that maintaining it required constant focus. "This plan is insanity," she told him when he explained what he intended. "The Imperial Palace is the most heavily guarded structure in the known galaxy. Even if we could land without being shot down, we'd never reach the Empress." "We don't need to reach her physically," Dane replied. "We just need to get close enough for you to establish a mental link." Nira's eyes widened. That's not possible. The distance, the interference." "You established a link with me within hours of meeting me," Dane pointed out. "And you said yourself that you and the Empress share a special connection. That's why she chose you as her personal guard. Why she experimented with making you more emotionally receptive." "It's still impossible," Naira insisted, but Dane could see the calculation in her eyes. "Impossible is just another word for something we haven't tried hard enough," he said with a grim smile. "Besides, what choice do we have?" Their debate was cut short by alarms blaring throughout the ship. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Imperial Defense Fleet on intercept course. All hands, brace for evasive maneuvers." The Artemis shuddered as it dropped out of FTL, immediately coming under fire from Imperial patrol ships. On the bridge, chaos reigned as the captain attempted to establish communication, while his crew frantically worked to keep the shields operational. "Imperial vessels, this is Captain Reed of the Independent Transport Artemis. We carry refugees seeking asylum and request safe passage to Valderon under Article 7 of the Galactic Charter." The response was immediate and unequivocal. "Transport Artemis, you are in violation of Imperial space. Surrender your vessel and prepare to be boarded." In the midst of this standoff, Naira made her way to the bridge, leaning heavily on Dane for support. Her appearance caused a momentary silence among the crew. "Captain," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in days, "set course directly for the Imperial Palace." Reed stared at her in disbelief. "That's a restricted flight path. They'll shoot us down without hesitation." "Not if we broadcast on this frequency." Naira moved to the communications panel, inputting a complex series of codes. "This is the Empress's personal emergency channel. If nothing else, it will make them hesitate long enough for us to get closer." The captain looked to Dane, who nodded. With a resigned sigh, Reed ordered the course change. The Artemis surged forward, weaving through the defensive grid as confused Imperial ships attempted to intercept without firing. "They're scrambling fighters," the tactical officer reported tensely. 2 minutes until they're in weapons range." Nira closed her eyes, her form beginning to shimmer slightly as she concentrated. "Get me as close to the palace as you can," she murmured to Dane. "I need to be within visual range for this to work." The next few minutes were a blur of tension and desperate maneuvers. The Artemis took hit after hit, its shields failing section by section. But somehow, incredibly, they continued to advance toward the gleaming crystalline spires of the Imperial Palace, visible now through the forward viewports. "This is as close as we get," Reed announced grimly as warning lights flashed across his console. "Engines failing, weapon systems offline. Whatever you're going to do it now." Nira stepped forward, placing her hands on the viewport. Her body began to change, not into another physical form, but into something else. Her blue skin becoming translucent, the stars beneath it brightening until she seemed to be composed of pure light. "Cover your eyes," she warned, her voice echoing strangely. What followed defied explanation. Dane, who had ignored her warning, saw Naira's form expand, becoming a pulse of blinding blue-white light that erupted from the ship in all directions. As it touched the Imperial vessels surrounding them, they went dark, systems failing. The pulse continued outward, reaching the palace itself, where it seemed to concentrate into a focused beam before dissipating. In its wake, Neira collapsed, her form reverting to the small, cub-like shape Dane had first encountered. He caught her as she fell, cradling her gently. "What did you do?" he whispered. Her eyes, barely open, met his. "Called for help." The comm system crackled to life, but instead of the expected threats or demands for surrender, a single voice spoke. Feminine, commanding, yet with an undercurrent of concern. "This is Empress Zalari of the Valtron Empire. The vessel Artemis and all aboard are hereby granted Imperial protection and safe passage to the palace landing zone. Any interference will be considered an act of treason against the throne." The bridge crew exchanged stunned glances as the Imperial ships that had been pursuing them fell back, forming an honor guard instead. Somehow, impossibly, they had succeeded. The Imperial Palace was even more magnificent than Dane had glimpsed in Neira's memories. Soaring towers of crystal and living metal reached toward Valteron's pink-hued sky, while gardens of bioluminescent flora cascaded down terraced balconies. Inside, the architecture defied human comprehension. Spaces that seemed to expand beyond the bounds of the structures containing them. Gravity that shifted subtly from one chamber to the next. Dane carried Neira, still in her cub-like form and barely conscious, through halls lined with Valari honor guards who regarded the human and his companions with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The refugees from Drake's Hollow followed in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the alien splendor surrounding them. They were led to a vast circular chamber whose domed ceiling displayed what appeared to be a real-time view of the space around Valderon. At the center of the room stood a figure Dane recognized immediately from Neira's memories. Empress Zalari. Taller than the average Valari, with skin the deep blue of the midnight sky threaded with constellations of stars, Zalari possessed a presence that commanded attention without effort. Her three golden eyes, identical to Neira's, surveyed the group with keen intelligence. "So," she said, her voice melodious yet powerful, "you are the human who has turned my empire upside down." Her gaze fixed on Dane with unsettling intensity. "The human who formed a forbidden bond with my most precious creation." Dane stepped forward, still cradling Neira. "Your Majesty, Neira needs medical attention. Whatever she did to contact you drained her life force to dangerous levels," Zalari finished for him. She gestured, and attendants rushed forward with a hovering platform covered in shifting, gel-like material. "Place her here. Our physicians will attend to her." Reluctantly, Dane laid Neira on the strange bed. Her small form seemed to sink slightly into the gel, which immediately began to glow with a soft blue light. "She will recover," the Empress assured him, then addressed the rest of the group. "You are all guests of the Empire. Quarters have been prepared. You will be treated with all courtesy while we resolve this unusual situation." As the refugees were escorted away, Zalari turned back to Dane. "You and I have much to discuss, Dane Riker. Walk with me." They proceeded to a smaller chamber where a balcony overlooked the sprawling capital city below. Crystal spires caught the light of Valteron's setting sun, scattering prismatic rainbows across the landscape. "Do you understand what you've done?" Zalari asked without preamble. "The laws you've broken? The traditions you've challenged?" "With all due respect, Your Majesty, I didn't ask for any of this," Dane replied evenly. "Neira crashed on my planet. I saved her life. Everything after that was just survival." The Empress studied him for a long moment. "Survival," she repeated thoughtfully, "a concept humans understand better than most species. Your adaptability is remarkable." "As is Neira's loyalty to you," Dane countered. "She nearly died trying to return to your side." "Yes, loyalty." Zalari turned to look out over the city. "A rare commodity in an Empress's life. Do you know why the hunters pursued you so relentlessly, human?" Neira said it was because we formed a mental bond, that it was forbidden. "It is forbidden because it is dangerous, not to you, but to us." The Empress's voice grew softer. "The Valari have survived for millennia because of our purity, our singularity of purpose. Emotional attachments, especially to other species, dilute that focus." With respect, Dane said carefully, that sounds like fear masquerading as strength. He half expected outrage at his boldness, but Zalari merely smiled, an expression that transformed her austere features into something almost warm. Precisely what I have argued to the Imperial Council for decades, she said. The Valari's greatest strength is not our purity, but our adaptability, our ability to change, to evolve. Naira was my proof of concept, a Valari capable of forming deep emotional connections without losing her essential nature. Then why were the hunters not acting on my orders? Zalari interrupted sharply. There are factions within my court who consider my progressive views dangerous. The assassination attempt Naira thwarted was only the beginning of their plot. With her gone, they moved against me more directly, using the hunters as their weapons while spreading the rumor that I had sanctioned the pursuit. Understanding dawned on Dane. So when Naira contacted you? She broke through the isolation they had crafted around me, Zalari confirmed. The pulse you witnessed was not just communication, but revelation. Every telepath in the capital experienced a moment of pure truth, seeing the conspiracy as it truly was. What happens now? Dane asked. Now? The Empress turned back to him, her eyes glittering with something like amusement. Now we put you on trial. The trial, as it turned out, was not to determine Dane's guilt or innocence, but to publicly reveal the conspiracy against the throne. Held in the Grand Forum, a massive amphitheater where the Imperial Council and representatives from across the Empire gathered, it was broadcast to every Valari world and colony. Dane stood at the center of the forum, Naira, now recovered and in her humanoid form, beside him. The Empress presided from an elevated dais, flanked by her loyal guards. Among the council members, several conspicuous absences marked those who had already been detained for treason. The lead conspirator, High Counselor Vexmore, had not fled, however. He sat among his peers, his composure perfect despite the mounting evidence presented against him. As witnesses testified to the plot, Vexmore's facade finally cracked. Rising suddenly, he pointed an accusing finger at Naira. "This abomination proves my point," he shouted, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Look at her, standing with a human, defiling our sacred traditions. The Empress would have us all become like this. This pet, bound to lesser species, weakened by emotion." Murmurs ran through the assembly as Vexmore continued his tirade. "Our greatness comes from our purity, our strength from our separation. I acted to preserve the Valari race, not destroy it." When he finished, a heavy silence fell over the forum. All eyes turned to Dane and Naira, waiting for their response. Naira stepped forward first, her voice clear and steady. "I was created to be different, yes, to feel more deeply, to connect more fully. But these qualities did not weaken me. They strengthened me." She turned to look at Dane. "This human taught me that true strength lies not in isolation, but in connection. Not in rigidity, but in adaptation." She paused, then addressed the council directly. "I stand before you as living proof that we can evolve without losing ourselves, that we can form bonds with other species without diminishing our greatness." Dane moved to stand beside her. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of his experiences, the loss, the struggle, the unexpected companionship that had changed everything. "I came from a world ravaged by conflict, by fear of the different, the unknown. I isolated myself because I thought it was safer, stronger. I was wrong." His eyes met Naira's briefly before returning to the assembled Valari. "Your Empress understands what too few leaders do, that the future belongs to those who can adapt, who can forge new connections while honoring the best of their traditions." The forum remained silent for a long moment after he finished. Then, to everyone's surprise, Empress Zalari descended from her dais to stand beside Dane and Naira. "For too long," she addressed the assembly, "we have hidden behind our superiority, watching the galaxy change around us while we remain static. No species can survive without evolution." She gestured to Dane and Naira. "These two have shown us a path forward, not through conquest or isolation, but through connection." Her voice rose, filling the vast space. "I propose a new era for the Valteron Empire, One where we use our gifts not to separate ourselves from other species, but to build bridges, beginning with humanity. The response was immediate and overwhelming, not universal approval, certainly, but enough support to drown out the voices of dissent. The conspiracy had been exposed, its rhetoric revealed as fear rather than wisdom. In the days that followed, change swept through the empire with remarkable speed. The refugees from Drake's Hollow were granted citizenship and resources to establish a new settlement. Diplomatic channels with human colonies, long restricted to minimal contact, were expanded. And at the Empress's decree, a new position was created, ambassador to humanity. To no one's surprise, she appointed Naira to the role. "And what of you, Dane Riker?" Zalari asked in a private audience after the announcement. "What do you desire as reward for your service to my throne?" Dane considered the question carefully. "Not a reward, Your Majesty. A purpose. I've been running or hiding for too long." The Empress smiled knowingly. "Then perhaps you would consider a position as advisor to my new ambassador? I'm told the mental bond you share with Naira makes you uniquely qualified." Dane looked to Naira, who stood nearby, her expression carefully neutral despite the hope he could feel radiating through their connection. "I'd be honored," he said simply. 1 year later, Dane stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching as Earth grew larger in the view screen. After decades away, he was finally returning home, not as a soldier or a fugitive, but as part of something greater. He sensed Naira's presence before he saw her, their mental connection having grown stronger with time and proximity. She joined him at the viewport, her form shifting subtly to accommodate the ship's lighter gravity. "Nervous?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "A little," he admitted. "Earth has changed since I left. So have I." "Change is the only constant in the universe," Naira observed, echoing one of the Empress's favorite sayings. "Without it, we stagnate and die." Dane turned to look at her, this extraordinary being who had crashed into his solitary existence and transformed it completely. In her, he'd found not just a companion, but a purpose, a future he'd never imagined possible. "Ready to make history?" he asked, offering his hand. Naira took it, her starry skin shimmering with what he now recognized as happiness. "With you? Always." Together they watched as Earth, beautiful, fragile, resilient Earth, welcomed the first official delegation from the Valtron Empire, heralding a new era of cooperation between their species, an era built on the most unexpected foundation, the bond between a lonely human and an extraordinary alien who had found in each other not weakness, but strength.